All right, so a little bit about the advantages gap. Lots of argument about this. And it's it's a little bit like he said, she said. In this country, it's a little political, tends to be along party lines. That doesn't mean that's what it is. It just means that's the way we express it. And there's a digital divide. No, there isn't. There's a digital divide. No, there isn't. The government should fix it. No, they shouldn't. Okay? So, without oversimplifying it, try to talk about it a little bit and share some resources with you. It's been an issue all along, right? Since computers first kind of came on the scene, and there was a period where it was much, much more talked about, and then it kind of leveled off, and now it's sort of going back up again. So the first set of issues was some folks have access and some folks don't. And that seemed like a really big digital divide, because there were people who just didn't have access. Generally speaking, along socioeconomic lines. Right? And then there were people who did. And you had what appeared to be a really big gap between the haves and the have-nots. And you had it in this country, you clearly had it globally. Okay. And that, we're going to date that roughly to, let's say, 1980, 1985, 1988, 1990, that range. Okay? From that point on, in America, it became a political football. Essentially, with the Democrats saying there's a digital divide and government needs to step in and provide access, and the Republicans saying there isn't a digital divide and the market will fix it. It's taken care of. Okay. So then, it depends on where you look and who you ask and who you talk to as to what happened. Okay? Clearly, there's data which shows that more people have access across demographics, such that the divide isn't quite as wide as it probably was then. More people have access. Okay? The price of computers came down, price of networks came down, more people have access. But now, so that's sort of the beginning of that, it's getting fixed story. But now you got a little different problem. Now you got a bandwidth issue. Okay? Remember, we lag dramatically behind a lot of other developed countries in terms of bandwidth access. Right? Very low access in America to broadband compared to some other countries. Okay, so now you're beginning to get a little differentiation in level of service. Globally, it's sort of a mixed picture, right? Places that have better broadband access than us, obviously, are doing pretty good. Then you got countries that aren't wired at all, and where wireless hardly works. So you got maybe a bigger international or global divide than you had before. Price has gone down in some ways. That doesn't altogether give everybody access again. Okay, so then you throw in cell phones. Are cell phones digital technologies? Do they count as computers? At what point does your handheld device start counting as a computer so that you have access to digital resources because you have cell phone access? We don't know quite how to cut that yet, right? Here's what we're concerned about, I guess, and there are a lot of aspects to it, but to kind of, if this is a global environment, if this really is, the World Wide Web, everybody connected, then if everybody's not connected, there's a problem. Because you're going to get migration of everything to this set of pipes. And that's what we're seeing. Newspapers are folding, television networks are conglomerating, Blockbuster's closing, all the distribution's coming through the internet. And if everything's going to start coming through the internet, banking, medical records, You pay extra for airline reservations if you make them by phone, right? If everything's going to come into the internet, and then you don't have universal access, or it's differential universal access, then you have another divide that's kind of like race, culture, and religion. It's along, whatever the terms are that lay out whatever this divide is. And that maybe isn't better than what we had before. Okay? So that's the concern, is that we shove so much in here. So you can imagine, I'll give you sort of the worst case scenario. And you could say Microsoft, you could say Apple, you could say Comcast, you could say, any big internet player, anybody who's big with technology and communication stuff. Okay? And so I'm going to make, let's say, what should we make? Movies or jeans or records or news or whatever the information is. Okay? And I'm going to bring it in 3D. I'm going to bring it in a virtual world. I'm going to bring it maybe holographically. Okay? And I'd like my money back. Okay? So who am I going to try to do business with? In general. What sort of demographic am I going to try to do business with? Yeah.
I would say maybe advanced users.
Yeah. And advanced users is one. And who else?
Wealthy users.
Yeah, people who can afford it. Can't afford a fast processor and a big pipe, big screen, whatever it's going to take to transmit that 3D image and receive it. To heck with you. If we're going to let just the market take care of it. Right? So that's the concern, is that this is a kind of environment, it's so pulled, it's not mass. I'm focusing on you. Because I can. Because I can track you, I can find what you do, and I can tailor it to you. Because I've got all your preferences from everything you've looked at the last year. If I'm going to focus it on you, why the hell am I going to do that if you're poor? If you don't have broadband. If you don't have the stuff on the other end, and the motivation, high-end user, and the knowledge. Why would I bother with you? And that's different than why I bother with you in mass media. Remember why I bother with you in mass media? Because the more of you I can accumulate, the more I can charge for that space and time. It's an altogether different logic. It's exactly the opposite, right? I'm only going to bother with you if you're in that top demographic. Well, that's not a force for the World Wide Web, for global access. That's a force for something else altogether different. So that's the concern. Remember, it's not just access. It's knowledge, how to use them, what you can do with them, what the advantages are, the ability to do it, the motivation to do it, right? And then the money to be able to get the stuff. Now, in some ways the price of the hardware has come down, right? Memory costs have come down. So it is somewhat more reasonable to buy one. I'm going to go out and get a $400 machine if I'm willing to use a Dell that kicks ass. Quite literally, $800 I can get a monster, right? And for $800, 10 years ago I couldn't get jack. Okay? And obviously you guys are carrying around memory sticks that are this big that have more memory than the machines that we had until 5 years ago. Right? So in some ways the prices have come down. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen with connectivity prices. The jury's out there a little bit. They're right now for most people kind of affordable, but yet there's that zero-sum game, relative constancy. The question is how much you're going to pay for it, and what you get. Okay? So there's a lot of issues in this that, the jury's out, and of course it does vary a little bit by where you are, right? These things vary a little bit by where you are in the world and what the country's orientation is and what's happened. So here we have Finland. Finland has said internet access is a universal right. It's an entitlement. It is a legal right for a citizen of Finland to have broadband. Got to have universal broadband. It's just like phone. Okay. Now we've never said that about cable. Right? Cable's a competing industry with what used to be over-the-air broadcasting. So we never mandated. We did mandate telephone though. In the 20s when we did the phone deal, we told the phone company they could have the monopoly if they made it universal, and that was the deal. So we've done it with this kind of industry before. Whether we'll do it with the internet remains to be seen. But there are folks who would sort of like to. But imagine the difference then between Finland and Nigeria. Haiti. Good Lord, we just had a disaster in Haiti. There was hardly any computer access over there now at all. Just listened to an NPR piece the other day about a guy who was arguing, he happens to own a company, a wireless company, but was arguing that we shouldn't even bother to try to wire Haiti. It's so poor, it's got to be done with wireless. There's just no way to do it with wired. Haiti's experience with wired telephones. Prior to the quake, there were roughly speaking 10,000 people in the country that were wired for phone, and that's in good times. Right? So the distribution of this stuff globally is wildly varies, and whether or not you can have a kind of World Wide Web in that environment, I think, is up for grabs, right? No, that's a different piece. Now, this is one of those examples that sort of speaks in both directions. Let me read just a little bit of this to give you a sense of it. This is called Big Cable to Offer Half-Price Net Connections to Poor Kids. The National Cable Telecommunications Association, which is a trade and lobby group, has announced a new plan to bring discounted computers, broadband access, and digital literacy classes to middle students from low-income families. Under the plan, any student who qualifies for a discount under the National School Lunch Program would have access to a subsidized computer, 2 years of half-price broadband, and free computer classes and tech support, which is great. There's the market, solving the problem. Oops. There's the problem that the market has to solve. That is, here we are, and we're still having to give middle to low income kids access because they don't have access. Okay. African Americans come to college 46% less computer experience than white folks in America today, nationally. 26% of Americans get access to computers at the public library. Still. And we'd like to sort of act like 24% of 19% of Americans don't even want to use internet resources. The last UCLA survey said there's about 18% of the folks who don't even want access at all, don't even care. Right? And you can't find 18% of the folks who don't want access to television. So, we still have a set of issues in this digital divide thing. It hasn't altogether gone away. It has changed a little bit. The nature of it has gone a little bit more global. We're not quite as concerned domestically about access, about a divide, but it's still there. And it still cuts along socioeconomic lines, and it's still troublesome. And the more stuff we shove onto the internet, the more troublesome it becomes. Because then not being universal is difficult. Now, you are at the peak of your access, even though we throttle your network. You're still in an environment where every step you take, essentially, you have access to resources. College campuses are sort of notorious for being little islands of connectivity. And then if you're in some cities, you have that as well. But once you get off campus, things change pretty dramatically. Okay. I know it's a little bit slow because it's throttled down, but it's always there and it's free. Relatively speaking, built into your tuition, but essentially, other than that, free. When you actually start paying that cable bill along with the phone bill, along with the TV bill every month. I just saw a deal on Comcast in New York, guaranteed triple bundled service for a year at $100 a month. Now, of course, good Lord knows what that goes up to in year 2, because I didn't have a chance to read the fine print. It was a quick TV ad. But that's a pretty substantial hit every month for telecommunication stuff, $100. That's only going to go up. I couldn't even total for you what we pay together. Family of 5. One kid gets his own. No, sorry, one child gets her own. So family of 6, one child gets her own. I pay $150 a month for phone, for wireless. I pay $100 a month for TV and internet. That's $250, and I pay another $25 for a hardwired phone for emergencies. That's $275 a month. $25 for the paper, $300. $10 a month for Netflix, $310. They go down to Blockbuster and still run a movie once in a while, probably $325. Information and communication in the $325 to $350 range. That's a lot. There are apartments that don't cost that much. So the digital divide is still an issue.